What, please.
Your first musical experiences. How did you first become interested in music?
I see. You see, strictly, I belong to a musical family. My father was a musician, Devesh Bhavadar, as he was known. My grandfather was a musician, Venkateshwara Bhavadar, properly known as Venkicha Bhavadar. And my paternal uncle also, he was a Vainika. My father played violin and had a very beautiful voice. He also sang. And that is the formation which gave me a very strong instinct to take up music like this.
Your father actually taught you music then?
Of course.
From the before you can remember?
I had a very strong instinct, and I insisted my father. Though he did not very much like to accept myself and all that, he wanted to take studies as such. Those people believed in studies and all that because they thought music might be very tedious and all that in future. He told me, why you sing for yourself? And anyway, I wanted serious coaching. Then he began. And by the age of 10 or so, I used to sing a few krutis only, but ragam, swaram and all those things came almost naturally, by Lakshya.
Did you begin singing for weddings when you were very young?
Weddings?
Yes.
No, some temples and all that, very private parties, even in my school days. And later, that too, I stopped, my father stopped, not to have unnecessary exhibitions of a small boy. He wanted to get me matured later.
He wanted you to be an engineer or what?
Some sort of general education and enter some office, because he didn't have much education in those days. So he was enamored of education and the office and all that. But anyway, I had my high school days and college days. When I finished my graduation in Victoria College, even then my father did not want to take music, though I had come to a very decent level, even to perform for a couple of hours and more. In Chennai and all those musicians, they were interested in me. They wanted me to even become their disciples, but somehow or other, I had my own view that I should have a bit of modern approach to things, as well as the traditional way of musical life and studentship, to get a very orthodox and traditional and scientific understanding of things. It was a bit of a dream, I can say. But somehow or other it came to fruition. When I was thinking seriously like that, I started in Kalakshetra, Rukmini Devi, with my master.
You came to Madras actually to study music or to...
Correct.
No.
I came to Madras to have a very serious course of music and have a very strong personal touch of things.
But you already had gotten your BA in science.
I had finished.
In what field was it?
Physics.
In physics?
I was a physics student. And then I came to Kalakshetra, and naturally they had started the Sangeeta ceremony course. I was the only student, and my master was here after Annamalai University. He came here.
Had you heard of Tiger before? Had you ever heard him sing? Or?
I had heard about his name. Just when people, my father and other musicians used to say, "Oh, there's a great musician who is rather a musician of musicians, and people should hear his music." Though he was not actually for a platform, like a platform musician type. He was an authority in music and so on and so forth. They used to talk sometimes. So I had only a hearsay of things. And it was my good fortune and privilege to come like this and to be very close to him for a number of years like that. Very close to him, and of course Kalakshetra atmosphere and all that. It was very, very natural. And
you were together every day, I think.
Almost together. Though I lived with my parents used to follow me. Like anything in my high school days, college days, in Kalakshetra life.
You were their only son, weren't you?
Yes, I am the only son. 4 or 5 children died very young, and myself and my only sister survived. So naturally my parents were very much attached to me. So they followed me like anything. So even in Adyar, I was here in nearby that, village. The next street we used to, their house. It was just
Here in
there
Adaya?
still, yes. Very next street there. Yes. We were there.
You mean where the Theosophical Society
It
is
was
now?
a society quarters. In fact, they gave me as a student very nominal rent and all that. Very considerate because I was a very qualified student and all that. And they were very watchful about my progress. They were almost all those seniors those days. They were all very much interested.
It was like a close family.
Close family.
Oh.
And my master also developed a sort of father and son relationship. Naturally, I had also that sort of parental regard and much more. And he knew from the very beginning, in fact, that his type of music, though he had numerous students in the Music Academy, Madras University, and Annamalai University, nobody could ever go near his style. All simply gazed at him and simply paid tribute.
He had a very unusual style then,
Unusual style.
and no one could imitate
Very
it.
unusual style. Very individualistic. It required a lot of assimilation and observation. The type of voice it required.
He paid a lot of attention to the words of the songs, I think.
Of course.
Is that
He knew almost half of the languages. Sanskrit, Telugu, Tamil, Malayalam, very fine English also. And he had a very fine background of things. Apart from the word meaning and all that, he plunged into the central bhava of the composer. Kavi Hridaya, poet's mind, as we call it. So he had a very high sense of sensitiveness and approach to things. And that made his music very, very subtle.
So that's why it's difficult
When
for
he
him to-
rendered compositions. Technicalities means raga and swara singing, tanam and all those things by himself. It was also inimitable. So in those days, great musicians, his contemporaries, even his seniors, say Muthiya Bhavadar, Vasudevachar, his own senior, Patna Subramanian's disciple, he was Puchinga,
That's right. But his style was very different. from
very
Patna
difficult, very
Subramanian.
difficult. All those great musicians of his own times, a bit earlier and before, after, all musicians used to admire him like anything. They used to simply adore him like unanimous opinion, no two opinion. At conferences, he was a very wonderful exponent of music, rather. The music academy conferences, when he used to discuss with ragas, the Raga Sanchara and Raga Lakshmana and all that, he used to give wonderful comments.
That's right. He was a real musicologist, a scholar.
He was a musicologist,
As
not
well
in the
as-
modern sense.
Oh.
Nowadays, I'm sorry, musicologist means simply writing books. But he was a musicologist in the true sense. He sang and explained things in his own inimitable way. There was sarcasm sometimes, there was humor, but very subtle. His summation of things. In the academy, it is well-known fact. He used to lead discussions for a number of ragas, Kafi, Manji, Kannada, Chakravaga, almost the controversial things right from the very beginning. In fact, conferences were very uninteresting without him. People nowadays,
He gathered his information from many sources, didn't he? Not just one guru, or how did he learn?
his prominent guru was, of course, Patna Subramanian. Patna Subramanian was the direct disciple of Manamachari Venkata Subbayar, who was one of the direct disciples of Tyagaraja Swami. So my master is Tyagaraja Swami's disciple's disciple. And I am the fourth generation. So we belong to direct Shishya Paramara like that. But his master was a wonderful man. He was a composer too. Patna Subramanian's Varnas, Kritis, Javlis, they resemble very much like Tyagarajas. Of course, my master also imbibed many traits from his master, along with some traits of other musicians also, conscious or otherwise. That is the beauty of things. Sometimes some qualities come to a musician unconsciously. You can't explain. I am told that his music, persons like T.V. Subbarao and Dhanammal, they used to say, his music had the qualities of Coimbatore Raghavayar and Mahavajinadiyar too. Sauka Madhya Tragala. Coimbatore Raghavayar was a specialist in Sauka. Patna Subramanian Madhyamagala. Mahavajinadiyar Tragala, speed.
The three speeds, yes.
All these traits they used to visualize in his music. He used to say, I have never heard Coimbatore Raghavaya. I have faintly heard Mahavadinadhyar. But my main structure is my master, he used to say. But unconsciously, things come to persons. It is all mysterious. It's a mysterious affair.
How many concerts do you give in every year?
Concerts.
How about how many?
Say 30 or 40, I believe.
It's several each month.
Not each month, every year.
Every year.
Yes. As an average.
Do you believe that it's possible for a musician to make a decent living as a musician, as in his profession?
By mere concerts. It is a very difficult question to answer. Depends upon his own private life, his own private, what is called family encumbrances and all. Because he might have some decent income, but it doesn't mean it will be sufficient for his maintenance and all that. Depends upon so many other factors. And classical musicians, usually they can't be getting as much money and all that as other allied artists get. So, for instance, film music and all that. I'm sorry to say, comparatively, and he has to maintain also a bit of status and decency. So usually, as a profession, classical music at any time was not attractive, I should say. No musician to my knowledge ever became a lacquer. But at the same time, within the limits, a good musician had a very nice life, I should say. Provided that he had his own outlook and approach to things properly. That's my version. There is no limit for this status and income and outcome basis.
Do you believe that artists are treated well by Indian society? Do you believe that the artists in Indian society are treated well?
Of course, artists are treated well, but from the there is regard and respect, especially in these days. The musical education has spread, but the mystery attached to Vidwans in those days is almost gone nowadays, because it has spread so much. There was a mystery about them. I'm sorry to say that is a bit disturbed because of the what is called expanse, the spread of communication and all that. It has lost a bit of mystery. But provided that a musician can maintain an individuality and all that, I think the mystery will be always there. Because when once a musician is able to build up an integrity and individuality, it is there always. Otherwise it will be normal. There are so many musicians in the sense they can sing also. As I am reminded a statement by one of the scholars, whom I don't remember exactly, he once quoted the famous Rabindranath Tagore statement, all singing is not music. All singing is not music. But music is something different. It comes from the soul, something like that. All singing is not music. It is a very fine statement. A man can sing, but it cannot be always music. Just a differentiation, very subtle differentiation. That was the type which my master had.
He had the bhava.
His music had a wonderful bhava. In fact, there were so many suggestions other than what he actually expressed. The only simile I can give you is, if you go to the beach side, you are seeing the sea, but actually we know we are seeing only the 1 by infinite part of the sea. We are seeing only very, very small area.
Only what's near to us.
It is very negligible space. But that space, it is able to suggest for us so much of variety and all that we are immersed in it. So also when a musician sings, it is not simply the actual music he produces. Of course, there is there. But there should be more suggestion about it. as the other day our friend Parsaji was referring, there is more beauty and meaning in the process which this MDR is creating in the music. The process have more meaning than the music itself. Silence.
Yes, the meaningful process.
Meaningful process.
Yes.
That should be the case. So that means there is something beyond music. There is something beyond what is actually expressed. That should be the criterion of good art. Otherwise, perfectly grammatically good music will be almost everywhere. When you go to a musician, you feel there is something lacking. Mostly, when you go to a music concert and all that.
How would you say that the state of music is different or the same than it was when you were a child? How has the state of music changed since then?
Oh, you mean the type of music in concerts, you mean?
Yes, I mean classical music.
Classical music. Of course, when I was a child, I mean, say, from the days I remember, 10 or 15, say, I listened to so many musicians and all that from that time onwards. In those days, of course, apparently, number of concerts were very limited. Facilities were less. Even in Madras, a city like Madras, I should say, there were no sabhas in those days might have been very limited when compared to these days. And the All India Radio, all these facilities have come naturally very much later. So the facilities were less and the frequency was over a wider range. So people could hear classical music only then and there with intervals. And now the pattern has changed. The concert pattern also has changed because in those days musicians used to sing for 4 hours and 5 hours because naturally when people had only lesser chance they sat for longer time. Also the musicians.
They'd make the most of it.
Correct. So that way it was, it happened to be a bit substantial perhaps. But how musicians looked at music was merely as a concert pattern and a form of profession, incidentally. The music, the educational aspect of things, the cultural aspect of art is a development in these 2-3 decades. That aspect was almost forgotten. I mean, there is not prevalent or visible. Concert means it was a concert just to hear and enjoy. But later it has changed. The people have taken a different turn. Also musicians with liberal education, with liberal approach and all that. But incidentally the frequency also has increased. Concerts and all facilities, we are able to hear classical music through so many mediums. So that is the difficulty when sometimes people get a bit satiated perhaps, I don't know. And institutions have also supplied us with a good number of hundreds of musicians. So naturally, proportionately, the audience, when there were tens of listeners in those days, at least we are having hundreds. When there were only a few, 5 or singles of musicians, now we are getting at least dozens. Proportion is changing. Both musicians, music students, music scholars, listeners, facilities, everything has improved, increased.
Do you think that concerts are better nowadays, or?
See, there also this question comes. You see, I don't say the music, in some sense it has improved. In some sense it has not. Because one thing was very, it was prominent. People used to devote much more time in those days. Practice and all, sadhana and all that, and the devotion they held.
Sadhana.
Sadhana was there. They used to work hard and all that. So, because concert platform was their main view. For that, of course, there was natural inclination and mold and all those things required was there. But naturally, in those days, they didn't have any other avocation, no liberal education, all those things were neglected. So they took up music from the very early stages.
And they were doing nothing.
They did nothing. There are certain musicians like that even in our own society now. I mean, 60s and above, such musicians. They did nothing practically except music. Now music is part of life. It has become almost a part and parcel of life, cultural life, decent life and all that. So the status is different. And this concert, the musicians' function is much more different and constructive, I should say. In those days it was mere enjoyment of music. Now it is enjoyment with a purpose. Purposeful enjoyment, meaningful enjoyment is the tone of our modern days.
Oh, for knowledge and understanding.
Knowledgeable, understandable enjoyment.